Welcome to I Scream, You Scream, your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and true crime. I'm Gina.
And I'm Kathryn.
Every month, we choose a new topic and a new ice cream flavor to go along with it. This month, we're talking about poison, and we are eating Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia, hashtag not sponsored, but wannabe, topped with some little pretzel pieces. So grab a spoon, and let's dig in.
So this scoop that I have today is like there are no chocolate bits in it. It's just cherries.
I put an abundance of chocolate in this, which Tom is very happy about. I opened our, we have a reusable pint thing that you can freeze for when we make homemade ice cream. And I opened it to get a scoop for this episode. And I'm going to need to make more because it's like 80% gone. And we're one episode into Poison Month.
Yeah, I forgot that we were only one episode in. This is the first month that we're definitely going to have to get more because of me. After the last episode, I went downstairs and immediately had more and like could not stop. I think that's why there's not much chocolate in this scoop, because I kind of like dug them out of the last one. But I kind of like the cherry on cherry because I didn't realize that Cherry Garcia, this is cherry ice cream with cherries
Really?
in it. I didn't realize that. Yeah, it's very subtle.
I didn't know that.
I thought it was vanilla, but it's very, very subtle. But I was eating it and I was looking at it and I was like, oh, that's kind of pink, just very, very lightly. And I looked at the container and sure enough, cherry flavored. So love that.
I did not do that. I have vanilla ice cream with the bits.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you did that or not. That's okay.
No, I did not.
Highly recommend if you're so inclined.
I am so fucking inclined. I was thinking about how much I wish I could get like actual Cherry Garcia here. Limited access to Ben & Jerry's flavors sucks.
Yeah, that would suck because I already feel like the stores around me, I can't always find everything I'm looking for. And I'm like, man, I have so many options still. Like, that would suck.
I know.
Even fewer.
So, as eager as I am to hear you tell this story, I think you have some exciting news to share.
Yes, I do. I'm like not even looking at the notes. I'm just sitting here thinking of ice cream. I have a new nephew. That's the announcement.
Congratulations!
He's here. The baby is here. He is an Aquarius sun, Capricorn moon, Pisces rising.
Whew.
I'm so excited. That kid's going to be weird as hell in the best way possible. That's it. That's the announcement. We're going. I haven't met him yet. We're going to see them in a couple of days. He's still brand new. I think they're still in the hospital. But everyone's good. Everyone's okay. He's a fat little baby. He's so cute. He's like,
how big did you say he wound up being?
It was like 9-12, I think. Yeah.
Oh my God.
9 pounds, 12 ounces, I believe. He's good.
Well, thoughts and prayers with your sister-in-law.
I know. Well, it's exciting. I feel like everyone's just secretly very excited about how squishy he is because the other two were tiny. Like my family, both nieces and the first nephew, they were all like teeny little babies and just teeny little people. He's like making up for it. He's the only one that's like very, very squishy. So I'm very excited.
He's the alpha
see the
baby.
roles in person. Yeah, she sent me this picture of him. Cute. He was sleeping and his face was all like squished, as like happens with babies, and it was just like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. I love a fat baby.
Yay!
So cute.
Congratulations to you and the rest of your family. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's almost Valentine's Day. What day is it?
I know.
I can't believe it's February.
So I know. I looked to see when this episode is going to come out, and it's coming out the week of Valentine's Day. So in the spirit of
I
love.
didn't even think of that.
Do you have any plans for Valentine's Day this year?
No, not at all. No, we don't usually.
I have no fucking clue.
We don't usually do stuff for Valentine's Day. The only times that we have, it's been, I can't even think of an example. Like the gift is, let's plan to go to this place like after Valentine's Day. You know, we don't do stuff like on, that's my nightmare. like I love celebrating Valentine's Day. That's great. But like trying to find like a dinner reservation on Valentine's Day is makes me
Fuck
feel the
that.
same way as trying to find a bar to go to on New Year's. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that
Mm-hmm.
same, like, feeling
I know
of, like,
exactly what
I
you mean.
kind of just want to, like, get our supplies and, like, hunker down in the living room kind of thing. Like, I'm scared to be outside in Valentine's Day.
Us
Yeah.
talking about this has made me remember I actually do have plans for Valentine's Day that I forgot about.
I was going to ask you if you had plans because I thought you did. I thought I saw that you did.
Okay, because I was in going out to a restaurant mode of thinking. But what
Yeah.
I forgot that we agreed to not do that this year. And instead, we're going to do this thing that we've been talking about for a while that we've started calling Fancy Night.
Oh, yeah. You did tell me about this.
Have I told you about that? Okay, yeah. So it's like the
Yes.
one
I
where
forgot
like we
about
get
this.
kind of dolled up just at home and we make like, we go to the butcher down the street and get like
Mhm.
a nice piece of steak and we make like creme brulee or something like that. Light some candles, you know, just like a
Yeah.
nice meal.
Like a meal at home. A
Homemade.
nice meal at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll plan for that. All right. So we're going to jump right in. In September of 1982, there was a series of mysterious deaths that happened in the general Chicagoland area. Right off the bat, I will say that I thought I knew this story very well. I thought it was very straightforward and just like this weird thing happened that changed the way consumers, you know, purchased their over-the-counter meds. And this was crazy for a while and it was all figured out. No, this was a rabbit hole I'm still in the process of digging my way out of. So, like,
Okay.
buckle up. Bear with me as I walk through this wild story that is still blowing my mind. Everything's fine. I'm just not good. So,
I want that on a t-shirt.
oh my God, merch.
Everything's
Hashtag
fine.
merch.
I'm just not good. Yeah, hashtag merch. Nice.
So the first 24 hours of this story is where we kind of hit the ground running. So again, I'm going to say bear with me because we're going to be rapid fire walking through some pretty distressing things. Trigger warning, lots of death. So it all started in Elk Grove Village, which is a suburb of Chicago just outside the city. Oh, already? Yeah.
What? Sorry, I'm already
It
getting
started
like,
in
one,
Elk
I
Grove
didn't know
Village.
this was a Chicago story, and two, Elk
Yeah.
Grove. Holy shit. Okay, damn. All
Yeah,
right.
you're going to be familiar with everything I say location wise.
Okay.
I'm just elaborating for everyone else because I kept like literally in my notes, I was like, oh my God, then we're in Arlington Heights. I'm like, okay, this is gonna mean nothing to someone in Dublin. But I do have a spot where I talk about like I have a personal connection with one of these locations. So I'll bring that up. Yeah, it was right outside the city. It was early morning on Tuesday, September 28th. And again, it's 1982. A little girl named Mary Kellerman started to complain to her dad about having a sore throat. He didn't think much of it. Kids get sick. It was kind of business as usual. He figured it's not going to hurt to just stay home from school, give her something for the pain, help her go to sleep. Like she can sleep it off. It'll be fine. She goes into the bathroom to take some medicine. And moments after taking it, her dad could hear her coughing and she dropped to the floor. She just collapsed out of nowhere. Dad has no idea what's going on, immediately calls 911. And by the time the paramedics got her to the hospital, she was in full cardiac arrest. And they took her into surgery to put a pacemaker in, but it was too late. She would be dead just a few short hours after she initially took the pain meds. One town over, in a town called Arlington Heights, there was a man who was a 27-year-old postal worker. His name was Adam Janis, and he had been experiencing mild chest pain, I believe, since the previous day. Nothing serious, just like, you know, he had kind of a strenuous job. He had 2 small children, just nothing that caused any concern. So he stopped at the store to pick up some pain meds on his way home from getting his daughter from preschool. And he went into the bathroom to take them, very similar to Mary. And his wife, Kim, said that as soon as he came out of the bathroom from taking them, he was clutching his chest and his eyes were dilated and like unmoving, like his eyes were frozen. And She said that it seemed like he was struggling to breathe. He also collapsed and was taken to a nearby hospital where he died later that afternoon. After leaving the hospital, Adam's family came back to the house to console Kim and just like be there for her while they figured out what the hell happened, because they had no clue what was happening. They didn't know if it was related to the chest pains he had been having or if something happened in the bathroom. They had no idea what happened at that point. So Adam's brother Stanley and Stanley's wife Teresa were two of the people that came back to the home to be there for Kim. All of a sudden, like mid-conversation, they both dropped to the floor. Like people were just dropping like flies out of nowhere and no one knew what was going on. The two of them had just been married a few months prior. Yeah, like brand new, like literally, I just got goosebumps, but it was said in a Chicago Tribune article that they hadn't even gotten the prince back from their wedding. Like they were like newlyweds.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Stanley was pronounced dead at the same hospital as Adam, and Teresa was on life support, but she was given basically zero chance of ever waking up, like right off the bat. That same afternoon, so we were now 2 families in, 4 people in, that same afternoon, another person named Mary. We had Mary Kellerman, who was 12 years old. There was another woman named Mary who was getting ready to feed her 1-week-old son at home. And she lived in Winfield, Illinois, another suburb of Chicago. And she had a terrible headache. Like she had just given birth. She had another small child. She just had your standard headache that comes with all of that. Again, nothing serious that anyone was worried about. Her doctor instructed her to take pain meds. So she took 2 pain pills, immediately got dizzy, gave the baby to her mother-in-law and like booked it to the bathroom to try, like she didn't know if she was going to be sick or what. Before she could even make it a few steps, she collapses in a chair and starts having seizures. Grandma's crying, baby's crying. Her husband is like freaking out, has no idea what's going on. So they call the paramedics and she was taken to DuPage County Hospital where she also would pass away the following day. That evening, a few hours after Mary would collapse and be taken to the hospital, a few towns over in Lombard, there was another woman named Mary, which at first I was like, what the fuck's going on with that? But then I was like, I don't know, Mary's such a popular name. I just couldn't believe that like the percentage of people named Mary like blew me away. So I'm sorry if that adds to the confusion. So this woman was named Mary McFarland, and she was on her break while working at the mall. She was a single mom of 2 young boys, and she had just started to get back on her feet after a divorce 2 years prior. She was prone to migraines, especially when she started working at the mall with all the fluorescent lighting and everything, and just anyone who's worked retail understands, like, getting migraines. It was to the point, though, where in the break room, they kept like a communal bottle of pain meds because so many people complained of headaches in that environment. But she kept her own, and before going back onto the floor after her break, she took 2 of her own pain meds, and very shortly thereafter came kind of stumbling back into the break room, complaining of not feeling well, and collapsed to the floor. And her coworkers were performing CPR on her while they waited for the ambulance to come. And she ended up being taken to the hospital. In the process, she did have a catastrophic stroke, and she would not wake up. The final victim of the day's mysterious / seemingly random but related deaths was a 35-year-old Chicago flight attendant, and her name was Paula Prince. She had just landed at O'Hare Airport that day and had been complaining of a headache. Again, like all these people had kind of very manual, either like manual labor jobs or there's a lot going on. So like the responses that they've been having were very confusing because no one knew, was this a result of something or was this an illness that they had and these were like symptoms or something. All these people shared, obviously, like they had headaches or aches and pains that obviously led them to taking the pain meds, but it was just business as usual. There was no other symptoms or concerns or anything. So she had a terrible headache because she had flown multiple places that day. She had just flown in from Las Vegas earlier that day, and then she was out and back to, I believe it was Connecticut. So she had been up in the air and all around that day. So She had gotten home and she was in the middle of taking off her makeup. And it appeared that she had paused in the middle of taking off her makeup to take some painkillers because 2 days later, after she had gotten home, her sister found her in her apartment in Old Town Chicago on the floor, and she had passed away. Investigators would later confirm that Paula was the 7th and final victim of acute cyanide poisoning within this 24-hour period. So how the hell are all these people from totally different towns in the greater Chicago area getting cyanide in their system? That is because they all took Extra Strength Tylenol. So what the fuck? How do we know this? How did we get here? What's going on? Okay, because that doesn't answer a lot of questions. So back up just a little bit. After Adam, Stanley, and Teresa, so that's the Janus family, the postal worker and his brother and sister-in-law, they all died within hours of each other. So everyone at the hospital was immediately panicked. Anyone who had been in contact with them was in quarantine because at this point they didn't know why. All they knew was these 3 people had very similar scary symptoms and just dropped to the floor and died. The Arlington Heights public health official, Nurse Helen Jensen, was asked to go to the home and investigate the situation. And she didn't even hesitate. She was in the middle of making dinner with her family or something. She heard what happened. She just grabbed her keys and bounced. She was there in 15 minutes. So snaps for Helen. We love Helen. Once she was at the house, she noticed there was an open Tylenol bottle that had just been purchased earlier that day. And there were 6 pills missing. 3 people had dropped to the floor. So she thought, okay, grown adults usually take 2. It probably has something to do with it. So she takes the bottle and gives it to the investigator on the case. His name was Nicholas Pichos, I think is how you say it. He was working alongside the Cook County medical examiner, Dr. Edmund Donahue. Dr. Donahue took the bottle and immediately the first thing he notices is that the bottle smells like almonds. Right away, he knows this odor is associated with cyanide. Combine that with the fact that people noted that each of the 3 people that had collapsed and died all looked like they were struggling against being suffocated almost. They all said that it looked like someone was strangling them, but no one was. That's basically how cyanide works. It's fast acting. And it essentially cuts off oxygen to the red blood cells. So oxygen can't get to where it needs to go in the body. And you essentially are
I didn't
suffocated.
know that.
Yeah, it's you are being suffocated just from the inside. So
anything from the inside, I'm not on board.
This is part of I was telling Gina before we were recording that I might need my inhaler for this, and this is one of the reasons why, because that's just a horrifying thought. So put these 2 things together, the fact that it smells like almonds and these symptoms suggest a lack of oxygen. He's already kind of piecing it together. It is worth noting, this is kind of an aside, but I thought that was super interesting about the whole almond scent. So I looked into that a little bit, and it's said that cyanide doesn't always smell like almonds. There are ways that people would be able to cover it up. And on top of that, only 60% of the population is able to smell that smell when it is present, which very alarming. Odds are in your favor that you'd be able to smell it, but it's straight. It's whatever
but just
it is.
Barely.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's not everyone has the ability to understand that scent or whatever. So
wow.
This is to say that even if that bottle did smell like almonds, which it did, according to the doctor, there's no guarantee that the 3 of them would have been able to smell it. So, like I said, these guys are confident that there's cyanide in this bottle. They end up calling the Cook County chief toxicologist, Dr. Michael Schaefer, and ask him to test it so that they can confirm their suspicions. Dr. Schaefer's team tested some of the pills from the bottle, and they concluded that it had been laced with 3 times the lethal dose of cyanide.
What the fuck?
That means 1 pill had enough cyanide in it to kill 3 grown adult people.
And they were taking 2 apiece, as you do.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And it was said, so Mary Kellerman, the 12-year-old, only took one because she was a child. So her dad told her to just take one. But like out of everyone, I think she went the fastest because she's so small, you know, like that's a huge amount of cyanide. If it could do as much damage as it did to the grown adults, like, can you imagine? Ugh, awful.
Because when you were talking about like how they would take the pills and then like immediately you'd be able to tell something was wrong, I was wondering about that because it's like it usually takes a second, but that much cyanide, I buy it.
I didn't look into the science because by the time I was done with this, I literally just wanted to go to sleep. We're like still in the intro here. But it's because it blocks it. It's basically immediate. And it's worth noting, we'll talk more about this later, but they were capsules. So they weren't like the tablets that we know now. It's like those gelatin capsules that you can break over and there's powder inside. So there's no like, it wasn't like now you have like the slow release, whatever. It was like immediately they swallowed and that gelatin dissolves very quickly. So immediately cyanide was in their system the moment they washed it down with water. Yeah.
Jesus.
They start making the connection with the Tylenol very quickly. Keep in mind, like, there's other people involved in this that they don't know are involved yet. One of the people that they were also able to connect pretty quickly is Mary Kellerman, and that's because when the paramedics came to get her, they had asked her father if she had taken anything, so he handed over his bottle of Tylenol, so they had it in their inventory. So they were also very quickly able to make the Tylenol connection. So now there's two situations where there's Tylenol involved, so they're kind of figuring it out pretty fast. The authorities start working with Johnson & Johnson, which is the parent company that manufactures Tylenol, and they were working with them to track where these bottles came from, and they learned that these two bottles were from the same manufactured lot. So not only were they able to track that they came from the same batch, essentially, they were also able to look into which stores this lot went to. And it was the stores that these people bought these Tylenol bottles from. So they obtained the receipts and records from these stores to see who bought Tylenol from those stores recently. And this fun fact in this very not fun story, I've been to the Walgreens where Paula Prince, the flight attendant, bought her Tylenol. I've purchased Tylenol. I've purchased Tylenol from that Walgreens. Yeah. It's in Old Town in Chicago, right across the street from, it's when I took sketch. Wait, I didn't know you then. I used to take sketch comedy writing classes at the Second City.
Oh,
and it was right across the street. Yeah. And I sometimes maybe wasn't like totally sober the night before. So like occasionally I'd like stop in that Walgreens, get myself a little snack, a little Gatorade, a little painkiller to go about my day. Yeah. It was that Walgreens. There's video footage of her. So that's how they made the connection with her. There's security camera footage of her at that Walgreens purchasing the bottle of Tylenol that was like found at her apartment. So they knew that she had gotten her Tylenol from that store. So they're making these connections, like, and they're looking for, you know, who has had other reactions like this, who has passed away like this within whatever time frame, and they start piecing it together. Not only that were they able to find everyone that actually took the Tylenol, but they discovered that there was one other person that had purchased a bottle of Tylenol from one of those stores. Her name was Linda Morgan, and she chose not to take a pill from that bottle because she smelled the almond smell. She was like, this is weird. I don't want to take this. Isn't that, oh, I just got goosebumps. Like, yeah. She had no idea why it smelled weird. And come to find out, you learn that, yeah.
Right? Imagine learning that. Oh my God.
So there could have been 8. Awful that there were 7. But like, thank goodness that she didn't. Johnson & Johnson immediately recalls Tylenol, specifically from this batch, off the shelves. Word gets out in the Chicago area that Tylenol is poisoned. Chicago mayor at the time, Jane Byrne, held a press conference like in the middle of the night, sounding the alarm. It was like immediate chaos. everyone was like throwing away all of their medicine. Nobody was trusting anything. People were like so scared. As a way to kind of speed up spreading the news with like throughout the Chicago area, there were police patrol cars that would drive up and down the streets announcing on their bullhorn, like loudspeaker, like throw away your Tylenol. It's not safe to take Tylenol. Get rid of your Tylenol. Like literally, like it was like
It makes
apocalyptic.
sense
Like,
that they would do
yeah,
that, but it's still like surprising to me to hear all of
yeah.
this.
It's strange because it's again like this is an era where news didn't travel as quickly and you don't get as many details as fast. Like in order to hear
Yeah.
this midnight press conference, you had to literally be tuning in or catch the news
Yeah.
or whatever. So like by the time maybe you made it to the morning news, it might be too late. Like maybe you woke up in the middle of the night with a headache and you know what I mean? So like they were doing everything they can to spread the word essentially.
That's scary as hell. Oh my God.
It genuinely felt like as I was reading through it genuinely felt apocalyptic because then there was also this
Yeah.
other layer of like, this is not a chemical mistake. You don't just accidentally develop 3 times the lethal dose of cyanide in a painkiller. Like it was immediately clear that somebody did this, you know, it wasn't an accident in manufacturing. Like this happened because someone wanted it to. So that's also horrifying because like why would you do that, you know, like
Yeah.
yeah, it was just this big question mark. Everyone was scared, everyone was confused. It was just chaos. So investigators are working day and night to figure out what the hell's going on. Another thing to note, which I found was very interesting, is part of the chaos and just fear, this happened 1 month before Halloween. So this event largely contributed to that whole rumor and fear about people poisoning candy. Like, if you look into that, there really aren't any super reputable stories about strangers poisoning kids' candies. There are stories where stuff like that happened, but it was always very targeted. Like, someone was trying to murder someone, therefore they poisoned candy. But, like, the whole concept of, like, a stranger doing that to a mass group of people stemmed from this. But that's not, like, a real huge danger, you know, like it's like by volume that's not a problem that the country or nation or you know world has. But this happened, like people taking Tylenol really were randomly murdered for no reason. The Halloween fear started this year, so needless to say this is big news. Authorities would create the largest task force in Illinois history to investigate these killings and just try to figure out not just like how this happened, but why and who did it and all the obvious stuff. All of this is happening within like a very short amount of time. So we're only like a day or two in at this point in the story. Over the course of an amount of time, like throughout this case, the task force generated over 19,000 pages of investigative reports. They looked at everything. I mean, they had literally nothing to go off of. Like, how do you track where this came from and where and why and all that? Another thing I do need to mention is not only did the medicine come from different stores, yes, they tracked which lots it came from, but the lots were manufactured in Pennsylvania and Texas and then ended up in the Chicagoland area. So
Okay.
it's like, at what point in that logistical plan did this happen, you know? So that was a big part of it. Like, what jurisdiction are we actually in? To narrow it down even more, speaking of jurisdictions, one of the biggest initial roadblocks in this case is the fact that it spanned multiple jurisdictions. The poisonings took place in multiple towns that crossed over 2 different counties. So that meant the individual police departments were obviously in silos, and each county had a different state's attorney in charge of each case. So there's just like a lot of cooks in the kitchen right off the bat. It was just honestly a mess from the get-go because as soon as you get multiple jurisdictions involved in a case, it's gonna be like a mess. I'm sorry. Like, I don't think I've like ever heard about a case that was multiple jurisdictions where it went like swimmingly. Not only was the situation chaotic from like a media and public standpoint, But the investigators couldn't keep up right off the bat. Everyone was like trying to figure out where to start and what was going on, who was in charge, like where to get their information, who has info. It was just like all over the place. Eventually, and when I say eventually, I mean like a few days later, because that's how fast they're trying to go with this, President Ronald Reagan gets involved, and he's like, what the fuck's going on? This is not the drug we're supposed to be at war with. Like, we need to figure this out immediately, because this is like chaos. People, like, citizens are panicking, you know? Ultimately, it is decided that because this case technically involves the Food and Drug Administration, because it was Tylenol, FDA is a federal agency, therefore it became the FBI's jurisdiction. So,
Okay.
I'm not laughing because it's fun. This story is stressing me out so hard. The first thing the FBI does is open an investigation into Johnson & Johnson. Why? The specific reason they open this investigation is to see if they failed to list potassium cyanide as an ingredient in Extra Strength Tylenol. Yeah, I'll say that again in a different way. A team of 36 FBI agents suggested that a multi-million-dollar conglomerate intentionally poisoned their consumers and just left it off the label. That is what they were saying.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question. Please don't judge me for it, but I'm trying to like...
It's not dumb. This
be open-minded here.
Yeah. Oh, I might have an answer. Cyanide, I think I know what you're going to ask.
Okay. Cyanide in any form is not an ingredient you put in things, right?
Correct. So yes, that's not a stupid question at all. It is. There is no reason to ever have cyanide in something like over-the-counter Tylenol.
Okay.
Ever. There are certain medical instances where there is cyanide in the body. There are certain instances in like a medical capacity where doctors will administer cyanide that is specifically to very drastically and very quickly lower blood pressure. Like if there's like an extreme medical emergency going on, it can lower blood pressure very quickly. That is only used, again, in an emergency and like under the supervision of a doctor. So like it may
So this is not
possible.
like a pharmacy.
This is not an over-the-counter. This is not an over-the-counter medical intervention. No.
Okay.
Like there would be no reason for Johnson & Johnson to put cyanide in their pills, you know? So yeah, not a stupid question, because that was something that was probably brought up within the discussion. And to be fair, even though it sounds like absolute clown shoes that they would do, it is like they have to consider everything, because they have nothing. They have no idea what the fuck happened, you know? So
that's
like,
fair. Yeah.
I laugh at them and I'm like, what the hell? But also, you know, hindsight's 2020, and that was just so far off base that like retrospectively it was like, wow, we wasted so much fucking time with that, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
So the investigation I just want to clarify something. The investigation that the FBI was conducting into Johnson & Johnson was not investigating whether or not they put cyanide in Tylenol, but whether or not they failed to list it as an ingredient.
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up, because one thing I wanted to say is leaving something off a label is a misdemeanor at most. So like people are dead for reasons we don't know, and they're like going after them for like mislabeling something. That's a slap on the wrist at best. So like from the public's perspective, it was like someone murdered 7 people and we're worried about a label. That was why it was viewed as such an outrageous path for them to go down, essentially. So yeah, they basically have nothing. They have no leads. They had a tip line that was open, and they had so many tips coming in, but none of them were leading anywhere until October 6th. A tip came in that seemed particularly promising. As a refresher, this is about a week later, so we're a week into this. The person who called owned a bar, and he had a regular named Roger Arnold. This informant considered Arnold kind of strange. He said that he had recently been through a divorce and was just really depressed over it. He also said that at one point he had been drunkenly bragging about purchasing two 16-ounce bottles of cyanide 6 months prior and saying that he was, quote, working on the project. Which I have to say, how do you just do they just have casual I
was thinking that
soda bottles of cyanide? Where do you get cyanide?
Where's the cyanide store?
Is this, I mean, I assume there's I don't know. I'm sure maybe it's used for rat poison or something like that. But just a casual
Maybe?
2 16-ounce, it sounds like something you just pick up at the gas station or something. I don't know. I
Also,
didn't understand that.
Dude, if I was at a bar and there was a guy bragging about buying 2 big ass things of cyanide, imagine that feeling. I'm not blaming anyone for not calling the police sooner, because I get that it's hard to do that, but also my gut reaction is I would immediately call the police.
I know. Well, and also I will say a lot of men say a lot of things at a lot of dive bars, so-and-so met Paul McCartney in the 60s or whatever. But cyanide, it's you're gonna
yeah, and to even if you don't actually have the cyanide, to say that you have tons of cyanide,
I will say,
unsettling.
That's the thing. I get it from a oh, he's just a drunk rambling idiot that no one takes seriously. But I also get what you're saying and agree with you. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm just that's just one of those things where it's man, what the fuck? Because also I don't know if they could have done anything previously except you're allowed to. It's not illegal to own cyanide.
But the nebulous working on a project, I don't know.
I'm just saying, I don't know if the cops would have been able to do anything, I don't know. And I'm saying I don't know because I genuinely don't know. If you do know, let us know.
Into the whole,
it's
if I was there, I would have done this. But it's just the thought of hearing that at a bar is so scary, or anywhere is so scary.
I know. Because then it's well, whatever. Yeah, no, we can't. We still have so many notes to get through. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just had to land on that because I know what you're feeling. And I agree. So yeah, this guy calls in this tip about this guy. The names were released of both the accuser and the accused, as is the case with any situation like this, especially when there's a mass panic. Everyone immediately was that guy fucking did it. This struck a nerve with the Roger Arnold guy. And he was just absolutely consumed with rage that he would be accused of something like this. And he ended up going into basically he went on this rampage, and as a result he ended up shooting and killing an innocent man named John. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Stanisha.
What the fuck?
I googled it and I couldn't find it. Yeah. So that, to this day, he is considered, rightfully so, the 8th victim of this situation. Because it was completely, he had nothing to do with it. He was just a guy that, I believe this happened at the bar. I'm not 100% positive. He was just a guy that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This situation had nothing to do with him. This guy was accused. He didn't like it. He went crazy and randomly shot this guy. This is just not a fun story. I'm so sorry. So yeah, he is our 8th Tylenol murder victim. Roger Arnold ended up not being charged for the poisoning because they didn't really have any evidence against him other than this tip and this claim that he bought cyanide. But he was charged and convicted of the murder of John. Obviously, he did it objectively. So that caused a lot of kind of an uproar because it was okay, not saying that it wasn't his fault. He chose to pull a gun on this innocent person and deserved to be punished for it. But the public was also that happened really fast. You didn't know if this guy did it or not. And everyone was just you definitely did it. So then things happened after that as a result of them kind of moving very quickly. So that was kind of the vibe of this. Everyone was just moving real fast, but also not really getting anywhere. And that was starting to cause a lot of frustration. Things were starting to get a little bit sloppy.
Oh no.
So then in the midst of everything that was going on with this first suspect, McNeil Pharmaceuticals, which is the pharmaceutical subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, received an anonymous letter that would basically completely sever the working relationship between the FBI and the Chicago PD. Because at this point, both entities are still on this case. It's FBI's jurisdiction, but It's also Chicago police jurisdiction, so they just kind of have to report to each other. So they were already kind of butting heads, but this situation that I'm about to talk about just completely ruined everything. Someone in the mailroom was going through the mail, as was their job, and they received this letter. The following is from a Chicago Tribune article about the case. They described it really well, so I'm just going to pull a quote from them. Penned in neat capital letters on a single sheet of lined legal paper, the message promised to, quote, stop the killings if Johnson & Johnson wired them $1 million through a Chicago-based bank account. It would be easy enough to kill again, the writer said, given that he had spent less than $50 on the poisonings thus far. The writer also said, quote, since the cyanide is inside the gelatin, it is easy to get buyers to swallow the bitter pill. Another beauty is that cyanide operates quickly, it takes so very little, and there will be no time to take countermeasures. So this mail guy's shook. Like, this poor person is just like, what the fuck did I just read? So he takes the letter to his supervisor, who immediately notifies the FBI. They analyze the letter and find enough clues to link it to a man named Robert Richardson. They're like, yep, this is him, 100%. Let's go find him. CPD is like, hold on a second. Where do we even find this guy? Like, we've got like a handwriting sample or something. Like, there's nothing, like, there's not enough to say he definitely did it, you know? So they were like, let's like just slow down a little bit. FBI is like, respectfully, no. And they just go. And like, they've made this big announcement. It's him. Find him. He's under arrest. On October 13th, so now approximately 2 weeks later, a warrant is issued for Richardson's arrest, and his photo is distributed to the national media. 500 miles away from Chicago, so about 800 kilometers. I did the math beforehand, so you didn't have to. There's a city called Kansas City in Missouri. A man named Sergeant David Barton was watching the evening news when he saw Robert Richardson's photo on the screen. He jumps up and yells, quote, God damn it, that's Jim Lewis. Who the fuck is Jim Lewis? What the fuck? So he calls up one of his friends, like local FBI guy. They go and meet in some secret location where he can be like, hey, your guy Robert, his name's actually Jim, and he's a piece of shit. Let me tell you everything I know. They compare pictures of Robert and his wife to a picture of this random guy Jim and his wife, and there are some differences, like, you know, one of them has a beard, one of them is paler than the other. Like, there was clearly an attempt to change the appearance. Regardless, Sergeant Barton is like, no, I'm 100% positive that's James Lewis. He was calling him Jim Lewis, but most documents said James, so I'm going to try to say James, but Jim's a name for James. So if I accidentally say Jim or James, I'm talking about the same guy, just so you know.
Cool.
There's not another name.
Thank you.
Well, there's
Thank you, because
names,
I would have
not
gotten
for
confused.
this guy. I'll try to say James, okay. But in my head, he's Jim. So if I say either one, just bear with me.
Cool.
So, as I previously asked, who is this James Lewis guy? To summarize him as briefly as possible, because we've been talking about this forever. At the time Barton was making this discovery, I'll just call him Lewis. Last name, Lewis. Lewis had over 5,000 pages of court transcripts, parole documents, and psychological assessments on his record. So he was very familiar with breaking the law. There was a lot going on. He had been very active in crime, let's just say. He was wanted in Missouri for basically this elaborate financial scam that, like, I can't even begin to explain to you what the hell he did. I'll give people resources to look into his other crimes if they want to, because holy crap, this guy was nutso butso. I just couldn't handle everything within this episode.
Okay.
In addition to being wanted for this active crime that he very clearly committed, he had also previously been accused of murder, but charges needed to be dropped on that case in Missouri due to, I believe, insufficient evidence. I couldn't find anyone explicitly say that. So if anyone has more details on specifically why, let me know. But it was kind of talked around in many, many articles that I could find, specifically the Tribune. I relied a lot on the Chicago Tribune for this. So he had a pretty severe history of abuse as a child. I'm only mentioning that because it was cited within like his psychological assessment and credited as a reason for why he was the way he was. So he was described as being just a very vindictive and emotionally detached person. And the main personality trait that I found used to describe him most often was that he always thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He just one of those like really cocky, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those guys that do these big elaborate schemes, they all share that quality. So once his name came into the mix, people were like, fuck, this is bigger now than just some random guy in Chicago. He's like a career criminal, basically. So on that note, these personality traits very much match the type of person who would put together this elaborate scheme to poison a bunch of random people for the purposes of extorting a huge pharmaceutical company. So they're very confident that they're going after the right guy. It is reported that when he and his wife were allegedly, I'll say, on the run from the murder and financial scams in Missouri, they fled to Chicago. They were only there for 9 months before they just up and randomly left one day and never really told anyone why. They ended up in New York City, and they kept a low profile for a little while until the news of the Tylenol murders broke nationally. And that's when he mailed the letter to the pharmaceutical company. That is something that'll come up again later briefly. Just something worth noting. He also sent a letter to President Ronald Reagan, which explains why he got involved so quickly thereafter. It wasn't just a, oh no, citizens are dying. It was like, hey, someone's talking to me and saying some scary shit. Like, we need to like wrap this up real quickly. In the letter, he said that he, quote, vowed to use model airplanes to jam up Secret Service radios. And he threatened to, quote, plant more cyanide pills all over the country. So that's weird.
That like, is, yeah.
Just kind of like, yeah, his claims were all very like strange, but objectively threatening.
Yeah.
So they go and search for Lewis. It is full on like a catch me if you can kind of cat and mouse game. Like he's very equipped to like avoid the authorities. You know what I mean? Like he's got experience running from the cops. So they finally find him, and they start bringing all of this evidence against him. It's difficult because similar to Roger Arnold, a lot of the evidence is circumstantial. For example, he and his wife had a ton of crap in their Chicago apartment that they left behind, and they had asked a friend to store it in a like storage unit or something. And among the things they left, there were manuals on how to poison people. And Lewis's fingerprints were found specifically on the cyanide page, which like that's pretty damning. But again, as far as like, you know, in the court of law, like
that's true.
It's not illegal. It's not illegal to own. Like I have books on like poisonous plants because that shit's fun to me. You know what I mean? Like from
it makes sense. It totally makes sense from a legal sense, but from a human being perspective.
Mm-hmm. Right. But then and so and I'm not arguing. I want to make it very clear. I 100% agree with you. The issue they were kind of running into is like, okay, so now that's two people that they were 100% positive did this because of like their cyanide connection. It's like, okay, well, you know, the public was kind of like, okay, well, we trusted you last time and then someone ended up dead. So like that was kind of what was happening. That was like the vibe of this case. Another thing that like this one, I would like if people are very familiar with the story, this is a piece that I would love more information on because I started kind of running out of time and I looked really hard for the specifics on this and I just couldn't find exactly. It's like it didn't totally fit for me. So if you have information on this part specifically, please let me know because It was said that authorities matched the fingerprints that they pulled from those manuals with a fingerprint allegedly found at the murder scene in Missouri. The problem is that I found a lot of reports saying that there originally weren't any fingerprints found at the murder scene. So it is suspected that those fingerprints were planted and they just literally were like, we need something to nail this guy on. Let's say there was a fingerprint. I do not know. That is something that was reported. I do not know if that is 100% what happened. Again, if anyone has any experience with this or knows anything or like knows where that fingerprint may have come from or why it wasn't like reported on or submitted as evidence in the first case, please let us know, because that was something that was kind of confusing. Like if they had his fingerprints at the crime scene, I don't know, maybe that could be insufficient evidence because that also doesn't immediately mean you're guilty. I don't know. This is very much a don't shoot the messenger. This is what was speculated about. Like this is what was reported. Just sharing the news. So I don't know. So James Lewis goes to trial for extortion. He goes to trial for the extortion letter and he is found guilty and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He was eligible for release from prison in August of 1989, but it was decided that his parole hearing was to keep him in custody, and then he was eventually released in 1995. So they nail him for sending these letters, and they get him for threatening to continue the cyanide poisoning. The issue is he never actually said in those letters that he did the poisoning. He said, I can help you stop it if you give me money, or I can make it continue. He never said, I did this. Like I said, having a manual on poison and being a pack rat and like running from the cops doesn't mean that you poisoned people. So they also had insufficient evidence to actually convict him for the murder of these people. Like they were not able to charge him for poisoning the Tylenol bottles. To this day, I'm so sorry to say, nobody has been convicted with tampering with these Tylenol bottles and murdering 7 people in 1982. James Lewis died a free man in 2023 at the age of 76. It is said that the FBI was in the process of putting together evidence and had planned to reopen a case against him. But when he died, that just fizzled. They were like, okay, never mind. No one really knows if they actually were going to do that or if they were just like, we need to like make this our guy. There is speculation that they just picked someone and landed on him and that was that. Many people are very conflicted as to whether he should have been officially charged or not, or whether or not, like, you know, the evidence against him could have or would have been enough. And when I say people are torn, I mean still to this day, the FBI and CPD, they're still battling it out 40 years later. The former Chicago police superintendent who worked this case went on record just a few years ago saying, quote, James Lewis is an asshole, but he's not the Tylenol killer. Like, that was his official statement on the situation. He's 100% confident that they were going after the wrong person. Like I said, this case is not solved. It's officially cold. There have been other suspects, but nothing even close. Like, everything has just been like a, maybe he did it, maybe you did it, maybe they did it. Like, there's never been anything concrete. The 2 I mentioned were the only 2 that were like taken relatively seriously. And even between the 2 of them, most people will say there was only ever one real suspect, and that was James Lewis. I will say I do want to talk about Johnson & Johnson a little bit. There is no real light at the end of the tunnel, but like I do want to talk about the role the company kind of played in this whole situation, because something that kind of surprised me, because you don't really hear about stuff like this very often, and it is the fact that Johnson & Johnson is often credited as being like a model example of how a company should respond in a crisis. This is used in numerous case studies of like the correct way to respond to stuff like this. A few examples of everything they did right was their response time was immediate. Like they were immediately like they didn't try to hide it all. They were like, do not buy our product. Like stop, like throw it away. Do not like no. They were extremely cooperative with the authorities. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't hide anything. They got involved right away. They were offering as much information as possible. Didn't need to be asked. They also changed their entire process and changed their entire product as well. They changed the pills, like I said earlier, from the capsules to the tablets that we have now. And they have that like little extra coating on the tablet to make it even like more tamper-proof. And speaking of tamper-proof medicine, the tamper-proof packaging that you see on basically every medicine bottle nowadays was designed as a direct result of this situation. So Johnson & Johnson literally changed everything about their products immediately after, like in the process of all of this going on. This really shook the entire country. It completely changed the way people trusted products and whether or not people were willing to buy certain products. So the response time, yes, obviously it was hugely like a brand preservation thing, but people really genuinely felt like they could continue trusting this brand because of how cooperative they were. Yeah, and this really is just such a sad story. There is no answer. There is no like really closure for anyone. Some of the children that were involved in this story have shared their own personal experiences with it. For example, the 3-year-old Adam Janice's young daughter that he had picked up from preschool that day, she was with him when he bought the Tylenol, and she lives in Madison now, fellow Wisconsinite, so
Heyo.
she's close. There I found it was like a beautiful interview, but also heartbreaking to read, story done on her and just her memory of the topic and her experience with this case, because she remembers like all the fallout and everything. The family of John Stanisha, the man who was shot by Roger Arnold, said it took them years before they could even stomach like the thought of taking Tylenol ever again.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, they had like massive PTSD. And this is all tragic, but like that, can you imagine? Like they had nothing to do. They didn't even buy the Tylenol. Like he wasn't even there, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is just like I'm going to say way sadder story than I originally thought it was, just because like there really is no answer to anything.
Yeah.
And I will say whoever did it, whether it was James or someone else, they sadly succeeded in what they set out to do. They wanted an uproar. They wanted to scare people, and they wanted to make a statement, and that's exactly what happened. And we're still experiencing the effects of all of that to this day.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I'm so sorry. It's awful. I know.
I had no idea that was a cold case, because I'd heard about the Tylenol murders, which I didn't realize it was a Chicago thing, which I already said, which was wild. Like at one point you mentioned DuPage County, and that was like my county growing up. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was cold, or I don't know if cold's the right word, but unsolved.
It is. It's a cold case. Yeah. Yeah. People are still talking about it, but it's like, I'm going to link, there is a paywall. You need a subscription to Chicago Tribune. They do like sales all the time. I bought my subscription for like $5 for a year. It's great. I highly recommend I will link it in the show notes. They did like a 6-part series on this just a couple of years ago. Maybe it was just last year they wrote it. 6-part series. They have a podcast, which I did not listen to the podcast, but there's like 8 episodes. I just didn't have time because I discovered it way too late. But that is like such a great investigative series on this topic. And the reason I bring that up is the way they talk about it is very much like this will never be solved. There's just no way. If it ever was solved, there's always going to be like a
question.
Are we sure? I mean, it was over 40 years ago. It was almost 45 years ago at this point. And like from the beginning, they just had no idea what direction to go to. And like maybe it was one of the guys they pointed to, but they're never going to know for sure, which is just the worst feeling.
Yeah, it is the worst feeling. This is one of those stories where, and I feel like we do a lot of these types of stories on the podcast, but this one in particular, it's one of those that make you realize how much you take your own feeling of safety for granted.
I know. I was thinking of that.
Like, I'm so prone to headaches. I take fucking like over-the-counter pain meds all the time. I would never think twice about it.
I know. This is like the quintessential, oh, that'll never happen to me. Because it sounds so outrageous. You are poisoned with cyanide in your bathroom? What? Why?
From a Tylenol bottle?
That makes no sense. Yeah, that makes no sense. That doesn't happen. But it did happen to 7 people.
My heart fucking breaks for everyone involved in this.
I know. Listen, when I found that article of that 3-year-old girl who is now a grown woman, I was like, not okay. That just breaks my heart. Because like you think, people sometimes grow up without parents. Like, that's okay. It's not okay. Let me rephrase it. It's not outrageous. It's not like, having a single parent is not like an outrageous thing. Like, it's a very normal thing. But like growing up in a single family household because your father and aunt and uncle were poisoned by cyanide randomly one day on your way home from preschool, like that doesn't happen. But it did happen.
The randomness of it in particular is just the twist of the knife.
That's what fucks it up. Like,
yeah.
Again, like, not that it would be okay if this was like targeted.
This whole thing is fucked up.
So random. But like no one is safe.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking.
Oh my God.
So yeah, definitely heart goes out to all those families. And it sucks that it's been so many years and there's no hope. I mean, like, again, I would be astonished if they ever, I'm going to say, solved this case, because there's just no way. I would be astonished. So sorry about this one. But I didn't know that. I thought, so let me tell you what I thought, because I know I was kind of spiraling last night when I texted you. I thought
now I get why you texted me.
Yeah. I knew that he had been in jail. I thought that he had been caught. I thought he was in jail because of this. I didn't realize that it was this whole extortion thing. And I didn't know about the other guy. I didn't know about that suspect and what he did, which is so awful. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. I thought it was like they caught him, case closed. I didn't realize
what I
that
thought
this
too.
was like an open.
Earlier today, Tom was asking me like, "Oh, what's Kathryn doing for her topic?" And I was like, "Oh, the Tylenol murders." And he's, "Oh, what's that?" And so I said like, "Oh, I don't really remember. I've heard about them. I think it was like way back in the day, somebody who worked for whatever company that made Tylenol poisoned a bunch of people, but they got him in the end." That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, that was part of it. So one thing, I don't remember if I said this, but I think that story comes from Arnold. He worked as a dock worker at Jewel, which is one of the grocery stores that had,
I haven't
Jewel.
thought about Jewel for a long time.
Well, it's a name I haven't heard for a while. He worked as a dock worker at one of their warehouses. So that's where that story comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I thought the same thing. When Phil asked me what episode I was doing, I was casually like, "Oh, the Tylenol murders." And he literally goes, "Holy shit, okay." So now I understand why he said that.
I can hear that in his voice.
I know. You know what I was. Yeah, you know what.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So now I get it.
Damn.
I kind of looked at him like, what? Like, I just thought he was like, "Oh, that's an interesting topic." Now I'm like, wow, that bitch is going to be emotionally unstable for a few days.
All right. Well, until next time, little spoons, keep it cool.
Keep it creepy.